This is a video of President Museveni at a certain point in time, courtesy of UBC TV. Don't know I really tried to find out where it was shot and what it was talking about, but it was clear that it was exasperated or disgusted by how people were executing certain duties. Let's watch and see.
I'm not happy and I'm ashamed even to come here. I'm not happy because a project which should have taken 2 years to start has taken 7 years. That's something to be happy about?
No.
I'm not happy at all.
All right. Let's watch one more and then we go on.
Mutayinza kwebaza nti wabale kulabira abaana bo nago n'okikiriza wandikoze ki nze ebitali mu mugaso sibiyingiramu mulimu ogwaffe okukuza ensi yaffe kati babebaza nti mukoze ki mwebale nnyo kubanga muyambyani mweyamba mweka kyetaaga okwebaza nti weeyambye.
President Museveni, at this point in time, Yali Molala Munye was very tough and serious about leadership and delivery, development of the people and service provision. So the question is, what happened? What happened to this version of President Museveni to be the version that we have today? Hey guys, welcome to this beautiful episode of The Update. My name is Francis Mukule. Thanks for watching. But before we get into these particular updates, I want us to watch a few videos together before we get into the depth of why we are doing this video today. This is a video of President Museveni at a certain point in time, courtesy of UBC TV. Don't know I really tried to find out where it was shot and what it was talking about, but it was clear that it was exasperated or disgusted by how people were executing certain duties. Let's watch and see.
I'm not happy and I'm ashamed even to come here. I'm not happy because a project which should have taken 2 years to start has taken 7 years. That's something to be happy about?
No.
I'm not happy at all.
All right. Let's watch one more and then we go on.
Mutayinza kwebaza nti wabale kulabira abaana bo nago n'okikiriza wandikoze ki nze ebitali mu mugaso sibiyingiramu mulimu ogwaffe okukuza ensi yaffe kati babebaza nti mukoze ki mwebale nnyo kubanga muyambyani mweyamba mweka kyetaaga okwebaza nti weeyambye.
President Museveni, at this point in time, Yali Molala Munye was very tough and serious about leadership and delivery, development of the people and service provision. So the question is, what happened? What happened to this version of President Museveni to be the version that we have today? It reminds me of what Norbert Mao, the president of the Democratic Party, one time said. They said that if the Museveni of 1986 actually met the Museveni of today, they would end up in a fight. And this has played out in several ways or fashion. For example, President Museveni is out here saying that no leader should be thanked for doing his job because it's their responsibility anyway. Yet, when you look at what is happening today, the NRM government is trying so hard to make people believe that they are working hard, but also to be thanked for the things that have actually achieved over a period of 40 years. And this was evident in their manifesto, which they titled Protecting the Gains. Many things were said in a way of asking for appreciation for what they have done, but yet leadership is to the people, and people should not be thanking any leadership for doing their job because it's their job. You understand? I captioned this video, what happens when a leader overstays in power, or a revolutionary overstays in power, or better still, what happened to President Museveni. I'm going to be taking you through, we're going to be looking back at what some of the things that President Museveni had before he came into power, his ideologies that he laid, and what exactly they became of today. So join me as we dig deep into this and find out exactly what happened to President Museveni. Let's just take a step back and dig deep into what President Museveni was like when he came into power. So in 1986, a young President Museveni stood before the nation with a lot of ambition at the time. He said the problem of Africa in general and Uganda in particular is not the people, but leaders who overstay in power. His words echoed across a wounded nation, a nation desperate for hope at the time, stability, and a new beginning. And we all know that at the time, Uganda was so much in turmoil. And of course, also after swearing in of President Museveni, one of the speeches he said that Africa has had several changes in leadership, but this change has often been, has ended up in turmoil. And therefore, Uganda at the time, we had been through Amin, we had been through Obote, and there was quite a lot of turmoil. So Uganda and Ugandans at large were desperate for a change, a stability, and a new beginning at the time. And Museveni supposedly at the time was that hope that Uganda needed. Now, he promised democracy, he promised freedom, he promised to rebuild Uganda and never a long rule. But nearly 40 years later, President Museveni still holds that seat of power. So the question is, what happened? I went and dug up a few theories that could explain what could actually have become of President Museveni at the time. To become a person that once disliked long rule, but now actually became a victim of that he disagreed vehemently before. So the Museveni of 1986 was a dreamer, a fighter who had just emerged from the bush. He spoke of restoring the dignity of Ugandans, ending corruption, and even giving power back to the people. Now, many saw him as a savior, the man who had come to rescue Uganda from decades of bloodshed and tyranny. His rise symbolized rebirth, that is very important, justice, and the triumph of the ordinary citizen. Now, for a moment, Ugandans believed that a new chapter had begun. You understand? For a moment, Ugandans believed that a new chapter had begun. But as years went by, the promise began to fade. The man who warned against overstaying in power began to stretch his own time at the top. And you could see that evident with the presidential term limit, whereby he definitely took away the 5-year term limit, and now the thing is just free for him to run for president whenever he willed. So term limits were removed, the constitution was amended twice, opponents were silenced. We saw that in parliament, how these guys went into a boxing frenzy just fighting over the Tojikwatako amendment. Voices of dissent grew fainter, and the dream of a peaceful transition slowly turned into a myth. President Museveni, once a revolutionary, had become a ruler. The hero of yesterday was now guarding a throne, unfortunately. Now, the question is, why has this been the case for Uganda? Political scientists have a name for this kind of pattern that is being exhibited by President Museveni's party, but also by himself. The first theory that political scientists actually use is called the iron law of oligarchy. The law says that every movement, no matter how democratic it starts, eventually produces an elite class that fights to stay in control. The liberator becomes a gatekeeper, and the revolution becomes an institution. It's evident with what is happening in President Museveni's government, whereby that President Museveni minds more about protecting himself in power than actually delivering for the people. And now the elite class that are ruling with him are also mindful more of making sure that the leader, who is President Museveni, stays in power so that they also stay in power. And this was evident actually during the SEC. This is just a vivid example. During the SEC elections, where members of the NRM actually evidently exhibited a high level of corruption. Money exchange was exchanged hands, and a high level of impunity, corruption was exhibited, and these people did with no shame. You know why? Because it was trickling from top to bottom. We've seen it with President Museveni, and now we're seeing it with the so-called RDCs, the LOCs, and the MPs. They're doing the corruption without shame because they want to keep themselves in power. The other theory is called the power corruption theory. I think what best explains this kind of theory. Have you heard the quote that usually say the quote that usually says that power tends to corrupt and absolutely, and it says that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This means that the longer one holds power, the harder it becomes to let go, because power is sweet, you people. Power is sweet. Sometimes I don't really blame. Sometimes it's hard to blame these people that actually overstay in power, because I've seen this even with the list of authority that's given to people. See this with class monitors. Let me give you the simplest example: class monitors or prefects. Let me give you an example of prefects. Back in school, prefects, of course, used to have preferential treatment. They used to get a little bit better fried beans and portion. They get a bigger portion of the porridge for breakfast. They have a bigger cubicle where they can sleep, and they had access to phones during our time. So these privileges are some of the things that corrupt people's minds to ensure that they kind of like prolong their stay. So imagine for someone that is just a prefect, and these people, despite the fact that, and you'd find that even if someone is just a prefect, they have this certain level of power that they wield, and they enjoy the thrill of it. So imagine being a president of a nation where you have all this privilege. You have a budget, you have a motorcade, you have a motorcade that escorts you. You have security, you have money, you have literally access to power. It tends to corrupt your mind, and unfortunately, President Museveni has become a victim to that. And then there is a psychological talk about the hubris syndrome. It's a condition that develops when leaders stay too long in power. So their sense of judgment blurs their ego, and they begin to believe that they alone can save the nation. They start to see themselves not just as leaders, but as the country itself. So I don't want to go deep into this, but I need you to I just need to give you a snippet of this. Do you know why President Museveni keeps saying, give me one more time? Because he has a lot of things that are business that has not been attended to. You know why? Because he has come to believe or convinced himself he is the only solution to the problems that Uganda is facing. And therefore, only him can help fix those problems by giving him more time to do so. But unfortunately, every time he asks for another tenure, things pile up. I don't know whether things pile up, and he ends up asking for another term. And this oftentimes happens when you have an efficient workforce or human resource. Because if you have people that actually are working to deliver for a nation, and then it's easy for you to hire or work with people that are going to deliberately prioritize fulfilling those demands, aspirations, and dreams of development that you have for that nation. Unfortunately, everyone in the government today is doing as they wish because they can't be brought to account. Institutions have lost power, and power has been zeroed around a few people. That's why in Uganda, actually, and it has gotten into the people, and President Museveni has successfully done that. Instead of people holding institutions to account, they instead call President Museveni to help them. That shouldn't be the case. Institutions should have the power to do so, to execute their duties and be held to account, but not individuals. And therefore, being cognizant of this particular theory or tendency, Norbert Mao at one point said that if the President Museveni of 1986 met the President Museveni of today, they would definitely fight, simply because the idealist who came to build a democratic Uganda turned into a guardian of his own empire. You know, at one point, President Museveni swore never to overstay. Instead, these days, he wants that no one else can lead Uganda but him. And actually, the funny thing is that this was actually implied in one of the videos in one of the statements that he made during a speech, but Ugandans did not take it seriously. President Museveni actually said, I think I have that video. President Museveni said, but people did not take him seriously. He said, where is that video? I think I screen recorded. He said, this is what he said.
And I hope everybody will now settle down and forget about alternative arrangements for Uganda. There will be no alternative arrangements for Uganda for a long time to come.
They clapped.
I think it would save a lot of effort if people could settle down and work with the national resistance movement and we build the country. If you have got illusions in your head, that's your own business.
This was said in 1988. 1988. By 1988, President Museveni already had a plan that is going to stay in power, and the NRM was going to be the sole leader of this nation for years to come. And therefore, anybody that had thoughts of changing leadership, those were your illusions. But people did not listen. Now, it appears that the spirit of the past seems to have been replaced by the fear of losing power for President Museveni. So I think, and that has been exhibited in several ways if you have been keen, by how much security detail he has, how many cars he travels with. So basically, he has tried to fortify his stay in power. But maybe this is just not a story about Museveni. Maybe it's just a story about power. What do you think? Because history has confirmed that power indeed changes people, because it tests their integrity, reshapes their vision, and sometimes destroys the very values that built it. So when power stops being a responsibility and becomes an identity, when leaders start believing that they are bigger than the nation to serve, democracy slowly dies. Now, Museveni's journey is not just Uganda's story. It's Africa's story, and perhaps humanity's story. Now, the question would be, will future generations learn from it or repeat it? Because power changes everything, honestly speaking. Let's go to Bobi Wine, who's currently, literally the biggest opposition leader in Uganda, and examine. Yesterday, I was watching Bobi Wine actually address people of Hoima. It was a certain part of the western part of Uganda where he was having his campaigns, and he was basically telling people that people should not be afraid that when he gets into power, he will change or overstay. But we all know, like I said, this story this thing that I've done, this story that you've done, is not just about Museveni, but it's likely about African leaders. It's not uncommon or peculiar that leaders eventually get changed by power. Power is so sweet, and power is so corrupting. So you have to be very careful on how you go about it. I can guarantee you that chances are so high that even if Bobi Wine is given a chance today to be the president of Uganda, he will not run for not less than 3 or 4 terms, because that's how sweet power is. You cannot convince me that Bobi Wine will run for one term and then leave it at that. He will also ask himself, okay, now if I leave power, who am I leaving power for? This is something we fought for. And you see, what I think, one thing that I believe has actually made people overstay in power is the belief that they sacrifice a lot for the nation, and therefore they need to be left in power. And it's partly due to the political environment that we have in Africa, where we have a lot of turmoil, and therefore people have to go through a lot of struggle to have power change. So when eventually that power is achieved, or change in leadership is achieved, whoever was a trailblazer or a great group of people that fought hard to bring that change, they will actually sit back and reap the gains. And how do they reap the gains? They consolidate themselves in power, take these positions in power, basically begin to run a nation like an institution that belongs to one group of people. So if you found whatever I thought I shared with you guys a little bit provoking, please share your thoughts and let me know what you think. If there's any change that we need to change, please holler at me and let me know. See you.